Hey there, and welcome to this session where we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 10, verses 46 onwards, which is the story of the healing of blind Bartimaeus. Hannah preached through this on Sunday, and we're going to take the time to look at this together. So first of all, start by going through the passage as a group. Somebody read it out loud. And just write down any questions that you have, any things that stand out to you, and anything that you can see is already telling you to do something. So take a few minutes to do that as a group. So on Sunday, Hannah preached through this for us, and what she looked at is how to approach Jesus through prayer. Because here we see a guy called Bartimaeus coming to Jesus, and we see how difficult that is, but we see what happens when we persist. So we read this. Then they came to Jericho. Now, here, this is Mark's gospel. Mark's gospel is very short. Everything is there for a reason. And we haven't got time to go into everything that we could do. But it's worth just stopping there. They came to Jericho. Jericho was the first city that the people of God had to take when they entered into the promised land. So the author's sort of highlighting this for us because this is sort of saying this is going to be a key moment. This is a threshold moment as the people of God, here represented by Bartimaeus, are going to step into something new. And as Jesus and his disciples, together with a large crowd, were leaving the city, a blind man, Bartimaeus, which means son of Timaeus, was sitting by the roadside begging. I don't know if you've been in a large crowd recently. It isn't always pleasant, but sometimes it can feel like you have a crowded thoughts, you have crowded diaries, you have crowded desires that prevent you from getting close to Jesus. It was definitely the case for Bartimaeus. There were external things stopping him from getting to Jesus. But also there's internal things stopping him from getting to Jesus. We read that he's blind. Now, I don't think we can even begin to imagine what his life was like, but he's physically, socially, religiously challenged. Like, physically, he's blind. We probably can't imagine that. Socially, law-abiding Jews weren't supposed to touch him. And so they'd probably throw their money at him as he begged. Maybe that's why he has the large cloak. But also religiously, rabbis are not even supposed to be near him. So he has no access to God. He has no access to community. And yet Jesus comes by and everything's about to change. So Bartimaeus is by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Now he shouts because he doesn't know where Jesus is. There's a lot of noise. There's a big crowd. He's blind, so he shouts. He shouts. It's his only strategy left. As Hannah said on Sunday, you don't have to shout all of your prayers. That'd be a bit weird to shout, "Lord, I need a car parking space," as you arrive at church. But sometimes it does feel completely appropriate to shout your prayers when we're in a desperate place. And the crowd react as probably many of us would want to, even speaking to ourselves. Many rebuked him and told him to be quiet, but he shouted all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." This is not polite. This is persistent. This is awkward. It's worth just taking some time to think about that. You have a man here who wants to come to Jesus. The crowd are in his way. His own body isn't going to make this easy, and then the people in the crowd are wanting to stop him. But he knows what he wants. He knows that he wants an encounter with Jesus, so he keeps persisting, shouting for him, which is prayer. Prayer is calling on the Lord. It is talking to him. And so this gives us a model that our prayer life, we should be persistent. And we're going to see the result in a minute. But first, we're going to stop and ask some questions. Just before that, though, I just want to draw you. There's a poet called Auden, who has this line, "In the prison of his days, teach the free man how to praise." And I think that's a lovely line for us to think about. We have lots of challenges that stop us from praying and praising, but the Holy Spirit wants to teach us to pray. So as we think about these questions, let's be encouraged that the Lord wants to help us to pray. So number one, persistence in prayer. It's the first thing we learned from Bartimaeus. I'd love you in your groups to share your biggest challenges in praying. What are the internal weaknesses, the external challenges that make it hard to come to Jesus? Then I'd love you to talk about, when do you find it easy to pray? What are the bright spots? What places or times do you find it easier to pray and talk with Jesus? And also, what things are there that you've had to pursue in prayer? Just share that as a group, spend 5-10 minutes and enjoy learning from one another. So the first thing we learn from Bartimaeus is to persist in prayer, and we see that he gets the result that he wants. Jesus stopped and said to him, "Call him." Now, the question that we probably should be asking there is, why on earth doesn't Jesus come to him? I mean, it'd been so much easier for Jesus to come to him than to call Bartimaeus, who is blind, over through the crowds to make his way to Jesus. Hannah asked us to imagine. Imagine if you're going from lot 10 to Fahrenheit. You've got to navigate over enthusiastic taxi drivers, crowds of tourists, and then the guy selling those fake mice. Just the worst. It makes me jump every time. It had been so hard for him. Why doesn't Jesus come to him instead? Well, Hannah drew on what Miles was teaching on 2 weeks ago, that Jesus dignifies us with partnership. He's crossed the impossible distance, as I've written there. Jesus crosses the impossible distance, and so he leaves the possible to us because his way is the way of empowerment. And you can imagine Bartimaeus' excitement there. Like, it's such an honor to be called out of a crowd. There's an amazing video of U2 performing, and they call this guy out of the audience who happens to be blind and is an amazing guitarist, and he gets to play with them, and there's just such joy in it. It's such an honor. I mean, not if you're an introvert or if you're at a comedy gig, then you really don't want to be pulled out of a crowd. But in this context, it had brought him so much joy. He's persisted in prayer, and now he's got the result. And you can see that's why he responds the way he does. They called to the blind man, "Cheer up, on your feet, he's calling you." Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet and came to Jesus. And it had been a very strange scene as he tried to find Jesus. The crowd, unlike in this photo, wouldn't have wanted to touch him. They probably weren't helping him very much. But there's an eagerness in his reaction. It's very physical. He's shouting, he's throwing off his cloak, he's jumping to his feet, he's coming to Jesus, and we see that he goes, he tells him what he wants, and he goes and following him. There's a physicality to this. We should expect that in our prayers. Sometimes sitting down in a quiet room with your eyes shut is the worst way to pray. Definitely for me, that's an easy way to bring sleep. What Hannah focused on the other day, though, is verse 50. Throwing his cloak aside, he jumped to his feet. Now, his cloak, it's interesting that he throws that aside because that would have been his part of the way he earned money. He would have this cloak and people would put money on it. They wouldn't want to touch him. They wouldn't go near him, so they'd throw it at him and he'd use it to gather up, because you can imagine trying to find coins on the floor. Otherwise, this is his income, but it's also his shelter. This would keep him warm. This is a place that has snow in winter. And so he throws it aside to get to Jesus. And you can think, well, he could have picked it up, but he's got an urgency to get to him. And so he leaves it aside. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? Like, he throws it away. Anything that would hinder or delay his encounter with Jesus. He trusts fully in Jesus. He leaves his warmth and his begging tool. He comes with faith, first of all, that he won't need this tool anymore, and B, that he'll be able to find it again to keep him warm later on. I had a tutor at college who was a blind pianist, absolutely incredible musician, and he lived his life on routines to make sure he knew that he could get to where he wanted to. As Bartimaeus throws his cloak aside, he's putting his faith in, because there's no way he's going to get back to it through the crowds and find it. I mean, it's probably going to be stolen. But he puts his faith in Jesus. There's an eagerness in his resolve to get to Jesus. And so I suppose this is the second question for us to discuss. Is there anything that you need to cast aside to get close to Jesus? i.e., what's your cloak? And also, where have you seen others cast things aside to get close to Jesus, and what happened? Take about 5-10 minutes to discuss that. So we see that we are to persist in prayer, we're to be eager in prayer, but we also see that there is a simplicity in prayer. Jesus, when Bartimaeus gets to him, says, "What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus asked him. The blind man said, "Rabbi, I want to see." Now, it's a really interesting interaction. Jesus knows he's blind. Like, it's blindingly obvious what he needs. Like, he needs to see. So why ask? And I think it's a few reasons. I think it's partly he asks to check his heart, to check his faith. but also asking distills the need. It focuses the mind. Also, it's important to ask, and I think sometimes ask out aloud, because sometimes when things are internal, they seem really reasonable and they seem really clever things to ask for. And it's only as we speak them out that we suddenly realize, actually, that isn't actually what I want, or actually, that isn't what I need in this moment. So I think it brings a clarity to it. But also here, in specifically, he's seeing what his faith is, and he's seeing, you've come to me, what are you expecting that I could do for you? And he says, Rabbi, I want to see. And it's an interesting statement, that, because in some ways, he's got it. This is Jesus. He can heal him. But also, he's not calling him Lord or Savior. He's calling him Rabbi, teacher. So he's only got partial sight. And that's good news for us, that Jesus will still meet with us, even though we don't always get it completely right. Jesus says, go, said Jesus, your faith has healed you. Now, again, this is one of those key kind of verses we have to grapple with, because does that mean if I'm not healed, is that because I didn't have enough faith? And really, that's not the case, as you can understand. It's the strength of what your faith is in, not the strength of your faith, that heals you. But faith does have a role. So, for example, at the moment I'm sitting on a stool, and it is not the strength of my faith, it's the strength of the stool that is keeping me from falling on the floor. But I have to put faith in to sit down in the first place. But it's the strength in what you are trusting that is most important. And it is Jesus who our faith is in. So even when our faith is as small as a mustard seed, we can see amazing things because Jesus is able to do amazing things. Now, faith does have a role. So faith is in being open. It's in the act of asking. And it really changes how you pray. In the same way glasses change the way you look, faith changes how you see, and it will change how you pray. And that's definite thing to talk about, discuss in your groups, and really grapple with that. And we see this result. Immediately he received his sight and followed Jesus along the way. Now, there's a few things just worth pointing out. First of all, that in Jesus doing this, it is a claim that he is the Messiah. There are no miracles in the Old Testament where the blind receive their sight. This is reserved for the Messiah. In Isaiah, we read all these amazing things about God, and he says, then will the eyes of the blind be open. Later on in Isaiah again, it says, I will keep you and make you to be a covenant for the people and a light to the Gentiles, to open eyes that are blind. And so this is sort of a prophecy that when the Messiah comes, he will open eyes. And so there's this moment where John the Baptist has sort of a moment where he's having doubts, and he asks Jesus, are you the one? Or we should look for somebody else? And Jesus says, go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight. He's saying, yeah, I'm the Messiah. Again, when a blind man is healed in John's gospel, brought before the religious leaders, they say, is he the Messiah? Says, I don't know. I was blind, but now I see. It's sort of comic irony there. And then Jesus in Matthew's gospel says, look, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, your whole body will be full of light. In other words, what he can give you is the key. Because if your eyes are full of darkness, if you don't have eyes to see, then your life will be full of darkness. If the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? So Jesus healing him here is a claim to be the Messiah, which again is important because this is the last miracle before the cross. It's a Jericho moment. The walls are down. Now the promised land is about to be taken. And there's again another little play on words. It says, immediately received his sight and followed him along the way. And the word there is hodos, the same word used for I am the way, the truth, and the light. And as he followed Jesus along the way, what happens next? Well, Jesus triumphantly enters Jerusalem, and then he goes to the cross. That our healing is received. There's a link straight made here between our healing and Jesus' work on the cross. Which again, this word faith here, faith has healed you. The word there is sozo, and it's not just talking about physical healing. Do you know what? There was a moment where Bartimaeus shut his eyes and didn't open them again, and won't again till the resurrection. But the promise is bigger. The promise is not just for physical healing, it's for eternal life, it's for the forgiveness of sins, and it's for everything that we are hungry and longing for. And so to finish, I want you to just discuss this in your group. Simpleness in prayer. Rabbi, I want to see. What do you want Jesus to teach you? What do you want Jesus to teach you? And I really encourage you to write it out and share it with one another, because it really brings a focus and clarity to it. And also, we believe in healing. Pray for anyone who is sick. Pray for anyone who's got sick loved ones now. We're constantly seeing Jesus do amazing things through the laying on of hands and praying for people to be healed. And so make sure you make time tonight to pray for anyone who's in need. Enjoy.